What's up? How you doing? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Karl-Shakur. I'm a photographer and adventure enthusiast, and today I'm going to be talking about my whole creative process, how I go about from having a photo idea to executing the idea and editing the photo in Lightroom and Photoshop. Basically how you can go from this to this. Alright, let's jump into it. Alright, so basically right now I'm in Norway. Well, I'm actually not in Norway. I'm in New York City. Looking for an apartment, but you know what? I'm just gonna let Norway Karl, take care of it and tell you the story. All right, so we're out here. What country is this?
Norway.
We're in Norway. Look at the conditions outside. It's like snowing all over the place, and we just had an idea. If we just like go outside and like leave the brights on, we could probably get some really cool like photos. Just standing in front of the light and like using our bodies as like silhouettes and stuff. So we're just gonna pull over to the side of the road here and see if we can get any sick shots. So that was actually about a week ago in Norway. As you can see, had some excellent driving conditions on the road, and just had like a very interesting idea. Just kind of like play with the headlamps of the car and stand in front and create some really cool silhouettes with our bodies, doing some cool poses. I wanted to see if we could get some cool photographs from it. So we hop out the car and immediately start taking a multitude of photographs. And after a couple of minutes, we're asking ourselves, how can we make these photos better? So ended up staying out of the car for about 5-10 minutes in the blistering cold. As soon as I got back in the car, the back of my head is completely frozen with ice in my hair because it was honestly, wind was like so violent and so strong. But I thought we got some cool photographs. So I'm just gonna jump right into Lightroom here and start editing so you can kind of see what my creative process looks like. All right, let's do it. To me, being organized on Lightroom is very important, even with your files. So basically, this is day one in Senya, and I named the collection Arctic Nights. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through all these photos, and then I'm gonna use X to keep discarding photos. I don't think these photos are good because my silhouette isn't really strong enough, so I'm just gonna keep discarding this. This is a very strong silhouette. Ooh, that is a good one. Very dramatic pose. Looks like I'm anticipating something. Looks like I'm about to lunge. Very like active. You can even see like a little bit of light dancing off of my head here. That's a good one. That might be the winner so far. Discard. In case you're curious on what I shot this with a Canon 5D Mark IV in a 16-35 f2.8 lens. Really need the low aperture so we can bring up the details, and obviously the 5D Mark IV allows you to boost the ISO when you're shooting, so I can adjust the noise later in post-production, and everything should look sharp when I'm done. But now I'm going to jump right back into selecting the photos that I want to use for this final composite. I think this is the winner. This is the last photo that I selected here. First thing I'm going to do is crop in a little bit. So usually what I like to do is to give most of my tone curves an S-shaped curve. So I bring down the shadows and then bring up the tail end of the shadows just to give it a little bit of fade. Bring down the midtones, come down on the highlights as well. Bring the tail end of the highlights down. It's looking good, and then you can toggle on and off this button just to see what effects that your little tone curve edit has done. It's looking good. So I'm gonna leave the RGB and go to my red tone curve. I'm gonna try to introduce some colors into this otherwise like flat image. There isn't a lot of color here. And I think I want to create like a bluish tone, just to translate the feeling of cold to whoever's viewing the image. I'm gonna drop the reds very slightly, drop the midtones a little bit as well. Highlights, drop the highlights. So moving on to the green tab, I think I'm gonna increase the greens and the shadows just a little bit. It's a little bit of green in the highlights. Just a little bit, moving it up just a teeny bit. Oh, by the way, these three dots, this is the shadow section, this is the midtone section, and this is the highlight section. So it introduces color or takes away color from wherever you're pulling to, you know? And for blues, I boosted them quite a bit, a little bit more than the green and the reds, because I wanted blue kind of to be the hero of the image. So I'm just gonna finish with the tone curve there, try and make some selective adjustments. Firstly, I'm gonna selectively bring up the exposure just a little bit. I might drop down the highlights just so I don't lose some of those highlights. I might increase the clarity as well, just to give it some more texture. Increase the noise reduction a little bit because there's obviously not a lot of noise brought into the image. It's looking nice. I'm gonna come here on the side and use a Radial Filter to kind of bring back the details. So I'm gonna drop down the highlights a little bit and increase the clarity to give it some texture. What I'm gonna do now is also take a brush, because it looks like we're losing some textures here down in the foreground. I'm going to brush a little bit of texture, bring down the highlights and increase the clarity just here in the foreground. And I think I'm done with the selective adjustments that I want to make. I'm gonna go right into the basic tab, drop down the temperature because I want to make it look very, very cold. Drop down the green as well, just to balance out that coldness. I take it to 12 minus 12. Ooh, looks like my Uber. Okay, so I'll pick it up from the front desk. Thank you. Yes, back with a burger. A yum yum for my tum tum. Ooh. Oh. That was a delicious burger. Let's get back to editing. So going through the highlights here, highlights need to be dropped just a little bit. I might drop the whites just a tad. I think the clarity is good, the haze is good. I'm actually gonna boost the vibrance a lot. I'm gonna go into the details tab here. The details is gonna be very, very important. A lot of noise and a lot of like weird stuff that's going on here. And begin to drag the luminance. There's some weird like noise in the colors here. So I'm gonna boost this color. Because we're good now, even though we've lost a little bit of detail, I'm gonna come with a sharpening and boost the sharpening and mask out some of that sharpening. Now, if you wanna see the befores and after of the sharpening, here it is. Before, noisy, messy, disgusting. And then after the sharpening and noise reduction, looking like a clean whistle. Good to go. This section is good. I'm gonna leave the details and move down into the HSL panel. Usually I go down and adjust the reds and the oranges and everything, but it looks like there's only blues in this tone. So the only thing I'm gonna adjust is the aquas, the blues and the purples, because that's just where the colors are. I think it's important to maintain homogeneity across your art. I wanna make these blues look a lot like the other blues that I've edited in other photos. So what I'm gonna do here is minimize this and put it on the side here. Open up my Finder and double click on one of my previous images that has the tones that I want to create. I'm gonna put it on the right side here so I can compare the blues to this image, and then I can start pushing and pulling in post to kind of like get these blues as close to this blue as possible. I'm gonna drop this just a little bit because it looks like there's a little bit of green there. Looking nice. Increase the saturation a tad with the purples. Yeah, you don't want any purples there, so I'm gonna drop that down. See what the saturation does for us. Saturation is very, very good. Boost the saturation, but still drop down the luminance. Aquas, there's not a lot of aquas in the image. Hardly any magentas, no yellows in the image. So I think this is going to be the extent of my adjustment in the color panel. It's looking good. Yep. So we can close this reference photo that I had from one of my earlier photographs, and we can resume editing just as we like. Most of these things is just pushing and pulling and seeing the effects that they create, and kind of like making very, very light-handed adjustments to tend into the direction that you want. For split toning, I think I'm going to leave this plain because but this image is really good. I don't want to really affect the color, so I'm going to leave that alone. For lens correction, don't need any of that. Transforming, don't need any of that. Effects, I think that's good. I think I like it the way it is, and this looks like it's good to go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this in Photoshop and see if I can enhance a couple of features in this to make it more dramatic and more stylistic in my own style. And here we are. So the first thing that comes to mind is I want to have very even splitters across the frame. I want to have a light line in the middle of the frame, and I want to have a light line on the top, and then right when my shadow gets pronounced, I want to have my shadow going down the bottom. Create a brightness layer on top of my base layer in Photoshop. Boost the brightness and the contrast a lot, and then invert the layers so I can then begin with my brush painting in where I want the brightness to show up. Now obviously I don't want it to make very pronounced adjustments, so I'm going to turn down the opacity of my brush to 5%. Make sure my brush is nice and soft. Right from where my body is, I'm creating an upward line just because I think it'll look more dramatic. Just that really cool beam makes it look like it's a flare. And then I'm going to cut this frame in half horizontally as well. That's looking exactly like I want it to be. but it's interrupting my silhouette. So I'm gonna come here and select my silhouette, create another layer mask, and put the brightness folder inside the layer mask. So I have to create another folder, put that layer mask on the folder, and then put the brightness layer inside that layer mask. I need to invert it. So what this does is it keeps the silhouette nice and clean. And you can see before and after I created that, it just looks a lot more dramatic with the light like cutting across the frame. Looks really good. Now what I want to do is pronounce the bottom of the frame and add some darkness and some contrast to my shadow. I'm just going to leave this alone and go to the next layer, drop down the brightness, increase the contrast right where my feet are, and then start doing the exact same thing that I did before, but this time with the dark adjustment. But what this does is to organize your eyes, so your eyes are just drawn right into my silhouette. You have leading lines pointing up from the top, that brightness, then you get, and then my shadows like, you know, it's pretty sick. Put that all in a neat little folder, name it cutting lines. I'm gonna try and pronounce these little snowy squiggly lines that are cutting across the frame. Do that with the brightness layer again. Increase the brightness. Might even increase the contrast just a little bit, and then invert it. Start painting in contrast and brightness into those snowy lines to give it more pronunciation and more pizzazz. You know what I mean? It's looking good. Looking good. Looks like it's done. Wow. Look at that. As soon as I save, it goes right back into Lightroom, and then boom, just like that. So if you were interested in looking at what the before, and then this is what the after looks like. Boom. Before, after. Sick, right? Sick. All right. Basically, when you're editing, you want to be very, very, very organized with your workflow. You don't want to be scatterbrained. You want to make sure that you have all your stuff put into very neat folders. That way, you're able to focus on putting together a piece, putting together the image, rather than looking for where your files are at. So I ensure that all my files are nicely collated and nicely organized before I start my edit. Secondly, you want to have a very concise method of going through every single photo, discarding the photos that you don't want to edit, so you can just focus down on 3 or 4 photos that look like work really well together. Thirdly, you want to arrange your develop panel in the area that you find best simplifies your edit process. This allows for a very, very concise and very, very smooth editing process. Lastly, what I'd say is don't forget to take it into Photoshop and to throw a little bit of zing and a little bit of pizzazz in there, because it helps to push your photographs to the next level. So that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today for today's little edit video. If you've got any questions about how I got these photos or how I go about my whole editing process, anything in the video at all, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. And make sure to like the video and subscribe as well, and ring the little notification bell so that way you know exactly when I post a new video. I really appreciate you guys joining me for this one. I'll see you on the next one. Peace. What's up?